Good morning. Welcome to Seattle Pacific University's annual Day of Common Learning. Each fall for the past 12 years, we have gathered together as a community to not only explore and discuss an important issue of the day, but to think individually and collectively as to how we might be a part of the solution. Of course, a highlight of this day is the Keynote Address. Over the years, we've been blessed to hear from some of the world's best thinkers and change agents. People like Miroslav Volf, Jennifer Wiseman, Jürgen Moltmann, Nicholas Wolterstorff, Tony Campolo, and one who continues to be a shaping influence and vital part of our campus community, Dr. John Perkins. Our speaker today is no exception to this list as we welcome Dr. Thomas Mirotic to our campus and our community. This year we gather to think about, to listen, to engage, and hopefully to act on the theme, helping youth flourish. It's an important matter that touches each one of our lives and the lives of those in our community, around our nation, and our world. In a moment, Jeff Van Duzer will introduce Dr. Maridada for our keynote address. Your program also includes the descriptions of the 12 afternoon sessions that will be facilitated by our faculty, staff, students, and community members. Also, please note the screening of a very important film, Girl Rising. With the exception of the film, all of our sessions will be offered 2 times this afternoon. We warmly welcome each one of you to attend these common learning opportunities. Thank you for being here. Provost Van Duzer.
Well, it's my privilege this morning to be able to introduce to you Dr. Thomas Mirotic. Dr. Maridada currently serves as the Director of the National Education Policy, Practice, and Strategic Initiatives for the Children's Defense Fund. In this role, he has many responsibilities. Among them, he manages and provides curricular supervision for the National Freedom Schools Education Initiative, which operates 200 sites, 82 cities, 27 states, and serves more than 200,000 students and parents. He sits on the leadership committee of the Children's Defense Fund. He plays an educational and advocacy role at various different levels of government. He is currently working with members of Secretary Duncan's staff to update and improve the No Child Left Behind Act. Dr. Maridada was born in Brazil, and at age 8, he moved to Detroit where he completed his K-12 education. He then stayed in Detroit to get his undergraduate degree at the University of Detroit Mercy and his master's degree at Wayne State. He then went on to the University of Pennsylvania, where he received a doctorate in education and educational leadership and policy studies. And at every step along the way, he graduated with high honors. He then went to work in schools. He served as a teacher, where twice he was named as the Outstanding Teacher of the Year. He moved on to serve as an assistant principal, introducing school reforms that ended up earning his school the National Blue Ribbon Schools Award. He was then selected as a principal, where he continued to implement policies that would become the hallmark of his approach to education, emphasizing raising student achievement in core academic subjects, increasing parent and community involvement, developing alternative inclusion models, and forging a number of corporate and civic partnerships. On the heels of his success as a principal, Dr. Maridada was asked to co-create and develop a plan at the county level that would raise student achievement in 24 urban schools that were in corrective action as defined by the No Child Left Behind. The schools that implemented his reform plan in their first year raised student achievement levels by 15 to 35% in both reading and math, and in the second year between 20 and 40%, soon eclipsing in performance schools that were never selected for needing special help. And one of the schools that his reforms were implemented at was so good that it was featured on Good Morning America. And then, immediately prior to joining the Children's Defense Fund, he served as superintendent for several urban school districts in Michigan, where he was named as the Michigan Superintendent of the Year. He has acted as a school turnaround specialist throughout his career in many of the most challenging schools and districts in the country. Last night I had the pleasure of having dinner with Dr. Maridada. And over dinner, he regaled us with stories of extraordinarily dysfunctional school boards and teachers that were highly resistant to any sorts of changes, and in settings that would have led any objective person to conclude that there was no hope. But he talked about how he would continue and persevere, saying that in some cases he simply outlasted the opposition. I asked him what it was that kept him so focused, kept him able to continue on, and he gave me a one-word answer. He said, faith. He said that he believes that any child that makes it into this world was not here by accident, that they were here with a purpose from God, and that in light of that, it would be incomprehensible that any of them should be set aside. So this morning I want to invite you to join me in welcoming to the podium a man whose spirit and whose life work give deep, deep meaning to the whole notion of no child left behind, Dr. Thomas Mirotic.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here, and to the distinguished members of our DS. I thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I thank Margaret for the incredible work that she has done, and she has led this invitation for me to come. To Michelle for the incredible, every I has been dotted, every T has been crossed, and it has been such a pleasure meeting the faculty here as well as the students of this incredible professional learning community. Thank you for allowing me to be in your midst. You know, I am reminded very oftentimes when I think about some of the challenges that persist in education, I'm reminded about a story of a man who was a fisherman, and he would go out and he would catch great fish, and each one would be bigger than the next. But he would catch a fish and it would be this big, and he would bring it in and he would be so excited about the fact that he caught the fish. And then, of course, when he would put it into the pan was small. So he would say, this fish doesn't fit this pan. So he would just take the fish and throw it out. So he would go back out and he would try again, and he would say, you know what, I'm going to get another fish. And then when he would get the fish would even be bigger the next time, but the pan was this small. And he would say, darn, this fish does not fit in this pan. So he would take the fish, and then guess what? He would throw it out. So he said, you know what, I am going to find a fish that actually fits this pan. And he would go back out and he would fish. And so the next time that he went fishing, he caught a fish that was this big. And he came back and he was so excited, and he tried to put it in the pan, but it didn't fit. So he would throw it out until someone saw him and said, wait a minute, what are you doing? And he said, well, I keep getting these fish, but they don't fit in the pan. And then someone said to him, have you ever thought about getting a bigger pan? And he said, oh, I never thought of that. And that is what is happening all of the time, very oftentimes with the dreams that God has put in you. That it's not about taking whatever it is that you have in you and making it to conform to such a small space and making it conform to such a small entity, but it's about you expanding your borders and expanding your capacity to be able to reach more people and to do more work, and not getting a pan that necessarily fits a small fish, but keep getting big fish, which are your dreams, your ideas, your talents, and all of the things that God has put in you, and find a space that is big enough, that is able to take the weight of the anointing that God has placed on all of your gifts and talents. So I want to say to each one of you that very oftentimes people will say to me, well, these are all extraordinary feats that you have had. And of course, I am just a little boy whose family originally came from Brazil, who was raised in the Brewster Projects, and ended my educational quest at an Ivy League university. And when people say that, they say, oh, that's so remarkable. But to me, that's only God's leading. And it's your ability to say yes, that God has a dream for you and he has a dream for your life that is much bigger than you could ever imagine. And it exceeds anything that you could ask, believe, imagine, or think, if you are willing to say yes. And very oftentimes we ask ourselves, how will we solve many of the dilemmas that we see in education? How will we help young people? And I say 3 simple things to you. 1, just try. 2, take courage. And 3, show up. And we're going to talk about those 3 things today. First of all, a very good friend of mine, he became a father for the first time. And he said that he asked his father, well, what should I do? I want to be the very best father that I can be. And I listened to him, and he said, and my father gave me such sage advice that revolutionized my thinking. And I said, well, what did he say to you? Because I wanted to take in these great nuggets of what he had shared with him. And he said, he told me, just try. If you just try, you will be the very best father that you can be. I'm oftentimes taken into a space where one of my favorite luminaries in Christianity was Catherine Coleman. And she said in one of her speeches, she said, there is going to come a time where I will stand before God, and I'll stand before Jesus, the one whom I have loved for all these many years. And when he asked me, Catherine, what have you done? And what have you done to change the world? And have you stayed on purpose? And she said, all I will do is to be able to look into the eyes of him and say, I just tried. Every single person that is out on this journey to make a difference, it starts with the ability to just try. How many people do you know that they are paralyzed because they don't want to make a mistake, so they don't step out? They don't want to be different, so they don't step out. They are afraid that someone is going to criticize them, and there are always people that are in the cheap seats of your life that are willing to criticize you for making a bold move. And I always say to people that if you sit in those cheap seats, and the reason that the seats are so cheap is because you haven't paid a price for them. But if you get to the premium seats of your life, the premium seats are those seats in which you've had to pay for it. You've had to pay for it sometimes with humiliation. You've had to pay for it sometimes with people not trusting you. You've had to pay for it sometimes with people talking about you. You've had to pay for it sometimes with people trying to bust your bubble and tell you that it can't be done. You've had to pay for it sometimes with people looking you in the eye and telling you that you're not the right fit. You had to pay for it sometimes with people sometimes saying that we're going to form an army of resistance against you. You have to pay for it with that. But you don't try because you are afraid to pay the price. Everything of excellence, everything that is extraordinary has a very high price tag to it. And the price means that I have to try. I have to try in the light of failure. Sometimes people will say, well, you know what? I had this idea 5 years ago and it didn't work out and I fell flat, so I'm just going to play it safe. But I love what Dr. Brené Brown says. She said, you can choose comfort or courage, but you can't have both. And I say to all of you that you cannot have both comfort and courage. You have to be willing to just try even when you don't think that it's going to work out, even when you don't see your way, even when you have to feel your way through, just try. When I arrived in one of the school districts that I was in as superintendent, I looked at the young people in this area, and of course, it was a school district where there had been 12 superintendents in 11 years. There was a struggling school district that had very little money. There wasn't a lot of hope in that community. And they used to call this community in Michigan, they had named it Little Saigon. And the reason that they called it Little Saigon is because there were drive-by shootings all of the time. There was the epidemic of crack was so hideous in that community until you have police. All you could hear all day long outside of the periphery of the school were sirens. And so when I walked into this district with this failing infrastructure, and I came up with my ideas, and I said, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do the other, people said, oh my God, poor thing. He has all these lofty ideas. Who in the world does he think that he is? Does he not know that the children here can't do that? Does he really understand that, the children, some of their mothers are on crack, their fathers are in prison, they're being raised by their grandparents. We have the highest dropout rate in the state of Michigan. Poor thing. He must think that he's in some affluent district, because certainly they do that over there, but we don't do that over here. So what we do each day is that we just come and we join in with all of the other prognosticators of doom, and we say what can't be done. And that was the real and the story and the narrative that people have played in their head. And of course, here I come, and I say, you know what? I think that instead of having remediation in this district, we're going to do acceleration. So what we're going to do is we're going to get an assessment, and it's going to assess our young people. We're going to find out where they are. We're going to teach to their strengths, and we're going to provide them some double dosing in the areas where they need the most help so that we can teach to mastery. And of course, when I first said teach to mastery, the entire teaching faculty laughed, and I'm almost belly-aching a guffaw that they almost fell over in their seats, that we were going to teach young people to mastery that live in crack homes. And I said, and if that's not enough, we're going to also have an early college program, and we're going to have them take both high school courses as well as college courses. And if that's not enough, we want to have them graduate with an associate's degree by the time that they leave high school. Now, of course, as you can imagine, when I said that, there were like crickets in the room because people had already exhausted themselves from laughing. So the next logical thing for them was just to be silent and to just stare at me as if I was a Martian from another planet. And when we first started this program where young people would go to high school in the morning, they would go to college in the afternoon and in the evening, and I said, and yes, I expect that they are going to earn a degree by the time that they leave here. And I could only see in the vision that to do the heavy lifting that it took to make this a reality, that I had to enlist the help of the people in the community. In the communities that I was in, there was a church on every corner. And so I went to every single church, and for a year, I went to every single church in the community. Every single Sunday, I went to every single church. And I said to them, I need your help. I can't do it by myself. And I told them, I'm willing to lay it on the line. I'm here to be vulnerable. I cannot make this happen without you, but this is my vision. Some of them said, oh, son, that's great. I'm glad that you have those big dreams and you have those hopes, and that's so nice, but you don't really know this community. You don't know about us. And I said, but I just want you to just try. That's all I want you to do. If it doesn't work out, we'll go and we'll get another plan. And I'll have you sit down with me and craft a plan, and I'll get your ideas, and you tell me how we should do this, but let's just try. So I had some folks that came along the journey with me, and they just tried. And every single student in the school district, I had them have a mentor from the community. Some of them were retired educators. Some of them were engineers. Some of them were lawyers. I went out to other communities where we did not have the intellectual capital in our community, and I would go to other communities and ask them to come in. But every single student in our school district had a mentor. They had a critical friend, someone to be accountable to, someone that was going to say to them, we're expecting you to learn. We're expecting great things out of you. We're expecting you to do phenomenal things. We're expecting you to move the world. I asked them to come once a month, and I want you to just come and just try to encourage them. Ask them how their homework is. How is it going? How is it going at the college? Is it tough? Do you just want to talk about anything that's going on in your life? And they just tried. And when they just tried, in that program, 4 years later, we had over 300 kids that entered that pilot. All 300 of them earned an associate's degree along with a high school diploma. They received their high school diploma on Tuesday, and on Thursday evening, they received their Associate of Arts degree. And it's okay to clap. Of those 300 students that went through that program, 298 of them went on to get their bachelor's degree. 150 of them went to graduate school. 35 of them went to law school, and 25 went to medical school. Because we just tried. And when we talk about any situation that seems as if it's insurmountable and you can't do it, the first step starts with just trying. One of the most important aspects of the work that you're going to be engaged in transforming young people's lives is that you have to be willing to take courage. Courage is such an amazing attribute. And I love what Maya Angelou says when she says, of all of the virtues, courage is the greatest, because without it, you cannot practice any of the other virtues consistently. You can't even love consistently without courage. You know, it takes courage to love someone. It takes courage to constantly put yourself on the line and open up and be vulnerable when you don't know what the other person thinks or what they feel. And I just need to let you know that when you decide that you are going to take courage, sometimes you walk into the landmine and you have to be prepared for that. So let's talk about what you may see along the journey when you decide that you're going to just try, and then you're going to take courage. Well, when you decide that you're going to take courage, you're going to run into some folks that are along the journey as you are going down the yellow brick road of courage. You're going to run into those inevitable dream killers. And they show up, and they show up in mass, and they show up in force. And very oftentimes, they are people that you least expect, and that's why they're so effective. You have a dream in you. And then the wonderful and exciting and brilliant and magnificent dream killers show up, and they say to you, well, did you know about this? Well, what about that? And have you ever thought about such and such? And have you ever thought about so-and-so? And blah, 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 blah. And then they give you, of course, 15 reasons why it can't be done. And so when you come across the dream killers, you have to be prepared, because there are always people that are seated in those cheap seats, because they would not dare try, dare come up with a solution to a problem. No, they get up, they get dressed every day, and their job is to have the little pen, and they are to burst every bubble that you have. That's their job. They were born for it. They were made for it. It is their purpose in life. They get great joy out of it. They jump up and down about it. Every single time that there is a new idea that comes on the scene, they say, oh my God, that's my cue. I'm going to go out there and just bust as many bubbles as I can. So they take their little pen of doubt. They take their little pen of it's going to fail. Do you know how many people have tried this before? Do you know that we don't do that over here? Do you know that we tried that 10 years ago and it didn't work? Do you know that this sounds just like the idea that so-and-so had, and when they tried it, it fell flat? Do you also know that we don't have any money? Do you also know that if you do this, we're going to just go into debt? Do you also know? And so it's always that when we do this, it is going to be Armageddon. If we try this idea, that means that any moment now, we are going to be all smashed and killed by a giant android that is going to hit the earth because you came up with a brilliant solution. And they take the pen, and it is wonderful, and they sit in a swivel chair so that they will be able to hit the bubbles from all angles. And they just go pop, 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 pop. And then, of course, they take a break, and they go out to lunch because they're exhausted from killing dreams all morning long. And then they come back in the afternoon, and they can't wait for you to bring your fresh ideas to the table and your solutions to all of the challenges. And if we're facing any conundrums and you come up with how we can solve them, they go, that's my cue. Boom, 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 pop, 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 pop. And I will destroy every single dream that you could dare to dream. But you have to take courage. Because very oftentimes, you know, when people take the time to discourage and to dissuade you, it is because, one, they've never seen it before. So please have mercy on them. You are the visionary. It's in you. Very oftentimes, people have never seen it before. Can you imagine what it was like when two men said, I have this phenomenal idea. I think, although we are all riding in horse and buggies, and also we've just moved over to the automobile, now I think that we're going to come up with this great idea that people will be able to fly on aircrafts around the world. And at some point, all of the folks who said, oh my God, they crazy. Oh, no one's going to be able to fly. Oh, who's ever heard of an airplane? What are you talking about? But of course, it has become the norm in our society. I would not have made it here without it. Thank God for someone that was willing to have the tenacity to birth an idea, that was able to hammer down and go through the birthing pains of being dissuaded, going through the birthing pains of someone telling you that it's not going to happen, going through the birthing pains sometimes of being an outcast. And we have to be willing to pay the price to swim upstream. You have to be willing to pay the price to, if it takes heaven and earth, that I will move it because I am committed to what it is that I am called to do. I tell you, you must take courage. And leadership work is not for the faint of heart. So when you decide that you're going to take courage, that is when you decide to show up. And when you show up, there are going to be folks that are waiting there to not only form an alliance with you to get this done, You will have other people. It's an idea whose time has come, where other people will join in with you. And you will not just have your voice, but you will have a cacophony of voices that will stand and sing the same song with you, so that you will be able to accomplish what God has put in you to do. I say to each one of you that also along that journey, when you face those people that are telling you that it can't be done, there is not one thing that I have had to do in education where people have said to me first, it was a great idea. Not one thing. I started my career with Marva Collins. I absolutely adore Marva Collins. And I don't know if you're familiar with Marva Collins, but there was a movie done about her life. Cicely Tyson played her, Morgan Freeman played her husband. And she was so fed up with what was happening in the Chicago public school system, because people had embraced status quo and they had embraced inertia. And they really did not believe that the young people could do extraordinary things. But she decided that she said that every single child that sits in front of me, there is nothing wrong with the synapses in their brains. And they can be intellectually astute. They can have the acumen to go on, and they can conquer any situation that has been placed in front of them. And she has such a disdain for the naysayers saying that it couldn't be done, that it led her and propelled her to start her own school. And when you look at the numbers of doctors, lawyers, engineers, and teachers that have come out of Marva Collins' one idea of just trying, taking courage, and showing up, that as they have done a study on the work of Marva Collins, they look at the almost 10,000 young people that have gone to college from the Cabrini Green projects out of one woman saying, I will stand against the Goliaths that say that it cannot be done. When I entered teaching, I went into the classroom and I loved teaching, and I thought that that's what I was going to do for the rest of my career. I never wanted to be an administrator, never wanted to be a principal, never wanted to be a superintendent. And I was just trying. I was just trying to emulate what I saw Mrs. Collins do. So my principal came to me and said to me, what is it that you're doing in your room? These kids keep coming back into your room after lunch, and they want to stay after school. What is going on in your room? I said, I'm just teaching. I'm just trying to make a difference. That's all I know. I can't tell you anything else that I'm doing. It's not magic. I show up every day, and I want to help them change their circumstances. And I know that they cannot change their circumstances without competence. And very oftentimes we think that we're doing people a favor when they have come from meager and very, very humble beginnings. And we say, oh, poor thing. Oh, I remember there was a teacher in a school that I was the principal of, and I would see her every day, and she would say, oh, she said, I would say, how are you doing today, Miss So-and-so? And she said, oh my God, I'm just having such a wonderful day today. She said, it was just so magnificent. And I said, really? I said, well, what are the children learning? And she said, oh, you know what, today I brought in homemade brownies. And today, the next day would be, oh, you know what? We're popping popcorn today. And then the next day she would tell me, she said, I had the kids come in and they're going to help me with a wonderful recipe for carrot cake. I said, so when do you teach reading? And so she pulled me aside and she said, she said, these children, she said, I don't bother teaching reading. She said, because, these children, poor things, they have such hard lives already. And she said, I don't want to inflict any pain on them by showing them what they don't know how to do. She said, so I just try to make it fun every day when they come into the classroom. The day she told me that, I put a transfer request in her mailbox. You can't do that here. This on my watch you cannot do. You cannot aid and abet in the destruction of young people on my watch. You cannot do it. Take courage. That propelled, of course, then the teachers' union that stood up and said, oh, I dare you. Do you know how long Miss So-and-so has been here? Mm-hmm, I do. And do you know how many children she has killed on her watch? It will not happen again. We draw the line here and no further. Take courage and show up. I have had situations where, as I was asked to go and be an assistant principal and into a school that had challenges, and I said, oh no, I don't want to do that. But I had to show up. And in showing up, we became a national exemplary school. I was asked to be the principal of a school that had challenges. And I said, oh, no, thank you so much. I was choosing comfort. I said, oh, no, yeah, I know what those principals have to go through, and I don't want to go through that. And I became a principal, and we became, again, a national exemplary school. The first time we became a national exemplary school was in President Clinton's first term. The second time that we became a national blue ribbon school was in President Clinton's second term. I was then asked to go to the county Department of Education and work with schools that were in corrective action. And they said, we have a proposition for you. We have 12 schools that are in corrective action, and we want you to devise a plan to raise student achievement there, just like you did in the school where you were principal and where you were assistant principal. And I said, oh no, thank you so much. No. I was choosing comfort. But then I went, and one of our schools was featured on Good Morning America. I was then asked to be a reform superintendent. And they said, now we have a school district that we want you to go and turn around. And I said, oh no, thank you. Thanks so much. I don't think I want to do that. I was choosing comfort. And several years later, I was named Michigan Superintendent of the Year. And so I say to you, to please learn from my example of not choosing comfort. Show up. Show up. And very oftentimes the reason that we don't show up is because innately we believe that we're not enough. Innately we believe that we're not worthy. Innately we believe that, oh, well, I don't want to go up against all of the resistance that it's going to take to create change. And I also want you to know that, very oftentimes people will say, well, you know what, if you're doing what God has called you to do, then everything is just going to fall into line. Well, but what they forget to say is that eventually it will fall into line. Because very oftentimes when you are on a path and you are doing what God has called you to do, you experience resistance. And you cannot believe that because you experience the Goliath of resistance, that it is not what God wants you to do. How many of you, if you could just dare to do anything that God has called you to do, and that God, you feel in your spirit that you're being called to serve in an area, but your parents don't understand it? Maybe professors don't understand it. Maybe someone has said, oh, that's never happened before. And if you do that, oh, that's going to be hard. That's going to be tough. But you have to be willing to go down the path, and maybe it's not been seen before because you are the person that is called to do it for the first time. I am reminded of what Dr. Miles Monroe said. He said that the place on earth with the greatest amount of potential and broken dreams is in the cemetery. The cemetery is full of people that died with songs in them. They died with answers to problems in them. They died with the formulation and the idea of a school in them. They died with an invention in them. They died with the creativity and the innovation in them to revolutionize the world and to change someone else's life. They died with it because they were not willing to just try. They were not willing to take the risk. And I want you to know that when you aspire for greatness, that you have to be willing to engage in something that is inevitable, and that is, it may fail. And if it fails, guess what? As long as you breathe, get back up on your feet and try it again. When we talk about our community, every single problem that we have in our community, there is a solution. And guess what? You're it. You're it. You're the solution. You show up and it causes demons to tremble. You show up and it disbands fear. You show up and you get an opportunity to say to the onlookers and to the naysayers that it is possible. You show up and mediocrity turns into excellence. You show up and what was impossible becomes possible. You show up and what was thought as a dearth and a famine becomes abundance. You show up and you get an opportunity to revolutionize the world. Each one of us, when we're talking about how are we going to change children's lives, we change it with the human capital that is in this room. We change it with the human capital that is there in our communities through partnerships. How do we change the world? We change the world when someone says, I'm just going to read to a kid. That's what our mentors did when they showed up once a month. They also showed children that there was someone that is rooting for your success. We are rooting for you to be successful. We are rooting for you to be outstanding. We are rooting for you to be the best. I am often paralyzed when I hear some of the daunting statistics, when I hear things like 80% of our urban young people cannot read or do math on grade level by 4th grade. And you can take in that news every single day, or you could say, that's my cue. My cue is that I'm going to change that narrative. That's my cue. Some of you are called into service in the medical profession. And when you go out into the medical profession, and if they said, there is no cure for cancer, you said, that's my cue. I'm going to do what I can do to find one. When you find that there are failing schools, some of you are called into education, you say, that's my cue. I'm going out and I'm going to change a school that was once failing to one that sits on the top of a hill, like a city that cannot be hid. And I'm going to do it for the glory of God. I love what one of the mothers in our church used to always say, Mother Lorraine Quick. She said, it doesn't matter who gets the credit as long as God gets the glory. And that's what I say to all of you. All of you are on a path. All of you are on a mission. All of you were born with a purpose. If you were able to make it through the birth canal, that means, by definition, God has a purpose for your life. Your job is to find out what it is. And when you find out what your purpose is, don't sit on the sideline. Don't sit in the cheap seats. I want you to go boldly, stand up boldly, walk in your authority, walk in the dominion that you have been called to walk in, and try. While you are trying, take courage, because there will be those that will tell you that it's not possible. And when you take on the armor of courage, when you are able to defeat resistance, when you're able to say to the naysayers that I will not bow and I will not bend, I want you to show up boldly, and I want you to change the world. I want everyone to please stand. And let us pray. Father, I thank you for the incredible assembly of talent that is in this room. I thank you for the purpose for which you have created every single individual in this room. I thank you. What an incredible God that you give us the privilege of being born and being able to establish your kingdom on earth. Father, I thank you so much that you have given us the equipment that we need to transform communities, to change the life of a child. And Father God, I thank you that when the naysayers come, I'm asking you to drown out their voices with the resonance of your glory and the magnificence of your name. I'm asking you to drive out every doubt and every fear, and I arrest every doubt, and I arrest every fear, and I slay it to the ground in the spirit. And Father, I thank you right now that if we have consumed anything in us that will allow us to now walk out our full purpose, right now I take authority over it, and I command us to cough it up, spit it out, and let it go. Father, I thank you right now that you are blessing every person that is here. And God, I thank you that you will allow them to be above only and not beneath. They will be the head and they will not be the tail. Father, I thank you that when their enemies come before them one way, they'll flee 7 different ways. And Father, I thank you that you will get the glory, and we will be mindful to give you the glory. So we submit ourselves to you in great humility, and we ask that you will walk with us, our precious companion, our adoring King. Take us by the hand, and I'm asking you to gently lead us as we try. Gently lead us as we take on the armor of courage. And Father, fill us with the dunamis power of your Spirit, so that we will show up and change the world. In Jesus' name, amen. I want you to say, with these hands, I want you to say, with these hands, and with this heart, and with this mind, I can do anything. Louder. With these hands, with this heart, with this mind, I can do anything. Now let us rock the roof. With these hands, with this heart, with this mind, I can do anything. 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 God bless you.
Thank you, Dr. Maridada, for your inspirational message this morning. After lunch, we'll move into the common part of our day, where you'll have the opportunity to try and show up and have courage to participate in academic and partnership showcases to learn more on how the SPU community is working to help youth flourish. The showcases, as Dr. President Martin mentioned, begin at 1 and repeat again at 2 with a special viewing of the movie Girl Rising over at First Free Methodist Church. You have the descriptions and locations of the sessions in today's program. I would also like to invite everyone to a special Talkback Session this afternoon at 3:30 in Demery Hall 150, where you can be in dialogue with Dr. Maridada about what you heard today and about his work with the Children's Defense Fund. Faculty, we will reconvene in Upper Gwyn at 11:30. See you this afternoon. You are dismissed.